Hello and welcome to Fresh Face Comics, the comic book podcast where a lifelong comic book reader guides his friend through the world of comics for the first time. My name is Joey Morgan, the aforementioned lifelong reader. With me as always is Jacob Licklider, the aforementioned newbie.
Why is it that when characters go blind in comic books, they get superpowers, whereas I just can't see very well?
And neither can our guest today. Our guest joining us for the third time on Fresh Face Comics, but for the first time on a bonus episode, my brother once again, Jacob Morgan.
Hello. I'm going to be honest. I'll agree with Jacob number 2 here. It is interesting.
And I had never actually made that correlation before, let alone the fact that you're both named Jacob, but also you both have a visual disability.
Yes.
Yes. Very different kinds, but yeah.
Much like the subject of today's Fresh Face Comics bonus episode, today we are talking about the first season of Marvel Netflix's Daredevil, or I guess not Netflix's anymore because now it's on Disney Plus. I binged the entirety of the Marvel Netflix universe way back in when did it get taken off of Netflix? February, March-ish? Yeah, no, February. It was taken off in February, but I had started and stop making so much noise. I had binged it back in like January, February, and done that whole universe. And when it was announced that it was coming to Disney Plus, I was like, Jacob, you got to watch it. Jacob, okay. For those who don't know, those who haven't listened to the past episodes with my brother on, my brother is Jacob 1 because he's older. Jacob Licklider is Jacob 2 because he's younger.
Yes.
And that's it. So I said to Jacob too, I was like, you got to watch the Marvel Netflix stuff. Like, it's coming to Disney Plus. It's like the best MCU content out there. And he said, yeah, we'll do that eventually. And here we are. I had already been on the process of showing my brother, Jacob 1, the Marvel Netflix stuff. Of course, starting with Daredevil and then Jessica Jones and so on. So you had seen this back, I think, right before they took it off Netflix in February, right?
Yes.
So interestingly, Jacob 1 is actually the freshest faced here because Jacob 2, you actually watched Daredevil season 1 back when it first came out, if I remember right.
When it first came out, I know I watched at least Daredevil season 1. I don't think I watched any of the rest of the Netflix shows, except maybe like the first episode of Jessica Jones.
Okay. And how much did you remember of it going in?
I remembered, honestly, the beginning of season 1 and the very end of season 1.
Gotcha.
Like, vividly in my mind, there's like one shot in the final episode. We'll talk about it when we actually get into a deep dive, probably, involving Wilson Fisk, right near the end. That all just like sticks in my mind.
Huh. Interesting. But overall, like, you didn't remember too much.
Not a lot. I didn't remember it being nearly as funny as it was.
Oh yeah. Like it's not your typical like MCU humor. This show started production, or at least the writing process, post Avengers. Yeah. So Joss Whedon style MCU was already in full effect, and it's still like it could be a funny show at times. But it's certainly not your typical MCU humor.
I would also argue just to say, the MCU itself didn't really get so self-referential, the cringiest funny, until Phase 3. Like,
I agree. Yeah, definitely.
Like, and it's only, at least in the films, as far as I can tell, gotten worse with time. And it's like, change things up a little bit, please.
Yeah. So before we go any further, first off, this is a spoiler-filled podcast episode. We're not going to be like we're not going to be doing like a complete deep dive like we do typically on our comic episodes. Today we're just doing it like if you saw our episode on the Batman, 2022's The Batman, it's going to be sort of structured like that. It's pretty much just a free, open talk, spoiler-filled. I assume most people have seen at least season 1 of Daredevil. If you haven't, go watch it. It's on Disney Plus. It's fantastic. You really don't need any more reason than it's just some of the best MCU content out there, even if some people don't think it's part of the MCU anymore. So yeah.
I mean, it's clearly made with the MCU in mind.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, yeah, there are
multiple references to the Avengers, and that's a pretty consistent thing throughout the Marvel Netflix stuff. But that's pretty much like the only film that they consistently reference, other than like maybe Iron Man 2, because
I would say
there's some Hammer, Justin Hammer stuff that they reference later on in the universe, but it's like, all right, you don't need to have seen the films to get it all. Maybe, like, honestly, just the Avengers, I would say, is all you need as far as context going in. But also, before we get into this, what is all of our history with the MCU as it stands right now? Because when we get into some of our Twitter questions, I want to know like where we all stand on what we've seen of the MCU. So I know for me, I've seen pretty much everything, bar a couple of the lesser known TV shows like Runaways, Cloak and Dagger, Hellstrom, things like that. Um, Jacob and Jacob.
I'll go first. I've seen most of the films minus some of the newer ones, and that's like a mix. Like I haven't seen what is it, Eternals?
Eternals, yeah. I think what Shang-Chi you haven't seen.
Yeah, I haven't seen.
I think the only Phase 4 films you've seen are what? No Way Home and Doctor Strange, right?
Yeah, those are the two newest films I've seen. I've not watched many of the shows, if any, minus the Netflix bringovers.
Mm-hmm. And as far as like Phase 3 stuff, I think you only missed out on like what? What Captain Marvel? Is that it?
And I've seen most of that on TV, even so. Like I know most of its plot, like just through osmosis, essentially.
Gotcha. And
but I haven't had a dedicated sit through.
Yeah. And how about Jacob too?
So I think I've seen the least of the MCU of everyone here. I've seen almost all of Phase 1, bar Incredible Hulk. A decent chunk of Phase 2, like mainly Iron Man 3, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, not Thor 2, and then Avengers: Age of Ultron. And then after that, it's really Civil War, Guardians of the Galaxy, Infinity War, and Endgame. And then I also I've seen WandaVision and Moon Knight, and I kind of want to watch She-Hulk.
She-Hulk's been enjoyable. There are things to like in there. I think if I were recommending Disney Plus shows that came out this year, I think it's so far, at the time this is being recorded, 3 episodes of She-Hulk are out, and I've seen them all. I'd probably sooner recommend Ms. Marvel if you're looking for a new Marvel Disney Plus show to watch. But She-Hulk's been enjoyable. It's a fun ride.
I've heard. I feel like oddly enough, the MCU's been doing pretty decent with the Disney Plus shows.
Yeah, honestly, like I'm consistently enjoying the Disney Plus shows much more than I am the films lately.
I think part of it's because they don't have nearly as much control of Papa Disney. Who's like, you must follow into our mold to make us billions of dollars.
Yeah,
well, and I also think that falls into the whole idea of a plot being better when it's serialized.
Yeah, and also like, I know one of the big like criticisms waved at the Disney Plus shows are that they're like 6-hour long movies, and as such they're padded to death. And I can see that sometimes, but honestly, I think it's more room for world building, and I will always take that. And I enjoy that personally.
It lets you have more depth of character than a lot of the recent MCU films have, especially since a lot of the recent MCU films also really have the continuity problem of 20 plus films continuity that they are also trying to build up on and reference. Mm-hmm. And
God, I think we're coming up on 30 films soon, aren't we?
Probably.
Something like that.
Wasn't it Ant-Man and the Wasp was like 20? So we're at like 20. I think we're at 28 or 29, somewhere around there. Like, holy shit.
Eventually the MCU is going to have the problem that the comics do.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's just
and it's almost going to be worse than comics, because at least comics, you can technically pick anything up and kind of enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
But like film is a very different medium.
Yeah,
and that's
but wow, we have gone on quite the tangent at the start here. So I think I'd actually like to start this discussion by going into our Twitter questions. I'd like to get some groundwork done through these. So kicking us off, I'd like to start off with English Giraffe at English_Giraffe says, "What is the best piece of MCU media ever made, and why is it Daredevil?" Who would like to take it away? I think we all agree, right? Like, it just is, isn't it?
I mean, I think it's.
It's up there. I'm not sure. I have a very hard time personally saying, "Oh, this is the best piece of like anything content."
And also, actually, at the time of recording, it's worth noting this: Jacob 2 has seen only season 1. Jacob 1 has seen seasons 1 and 2, and I have seen the whole thing. Yeah.
So
when we talk about Daredevil being the best piece of MCU media, I think I probably would have the most experience here in saying that. Yes, I would agree with that, definitely.
I think it might be one of at least the best versions of a superhero origin story for the MCU. like maybe really only beaten by like the trilogy of Phase 1 films of just Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor.
Yeah.
I say Phase 1 is really strong,
Mhm.
and I think Daredevil's like a really great place to like watch MCU content. And because I've seen just a little more than Jacob 2, but not as much as you, obviously, I think it's up there. But like I said, I also have a hard time saying, oh, this is like the best piece of insert your favorite
here's the
franchise
thing.
here.
Like when it comes to Daredevil, in my opinion, I think each season just gets better than the last. So like season 3 is just like if there was, if I could, at the risk of being hyperbolic, it is like an 11 out of 10 season of television. Season 3, like that is fucking peak, and I love it. So yeah, I mean, I think it's fantastic. I understand some of your apprehension and like other things that may overtake it, but especially with what you two have only seen, I think it's certainly one of those pieces of media that's better to enjoy when you've seen the whole thing. That's of course not to say anything against season 1 because we're here to talk about how great it is. You know?
Like,
I will say it may have some of the
isolation is
best.
just good.
It may have some of the best casting of the MCU. Like,
Ooh, yeah. Actually, before we continue with Twitter questions, let's talk about some of that casting.
yeah, like
Kicking off with our lead, Charlie Cox as Daredevil, as Matt Murdock, the man without fear. I mean, God, what a performance, you know? You already mentioned that there's a fair bit of humor in this show, and oddly enough, most of that comes from Matt Murdock as a person. You know?
it is either Charlie. It's basically a mix. The humor comes from a mix of Charlie Cox being a sarcastic bastard, just as an actor, which I think because he's coming back in the MCU, I think that can actually really help. Just having just the way Cox portrays the character, just in general, no matter what the script is doing.
Yeah, definitely.
Like there's this arrogance, but there's also just really good. He just knows how to play off other people.
Oh yeah, and I mean, of course, perfect time to bring up Eldon Henson as Foggy Nelson, who's just a great source of humanity for this show. He's a lovable character, and I think you really feel his and Matt's relationship because of how well Henson and Cox work off each other.
I think Foggy might be my favorite character just because Henson's performance throughout everything. One,
especially when you get to an episode like Nelson v. Murdoch, and you see them come at odds with each other, and played right alongside those flashbacks with them first becoming friends.
There's clear character arcs, and what's nice is that this series was made with the idea that this might be all we get.
Yeah. Like, so it is a very complete story, isn't it?
There really aren't sequel teases, bar I think a couple of things in a couple of later episodes, but those are also just minor hanging threads that, with the scale of what the show is trying to do, because I think the scale of what the show is trying to do is important, which is what helps make it work and make it feel really intimate.
It's very focused. Like it's street level. It's focused, and you feel that in how all of our characters interact on this street level type of superhero show.
Yeah,
I don't want to drag the conversation back too far, but I wanted to say something. At least I thought I liked seeing through the show. We said about the humor and Charlie Cox, and I'm blanking on who we just said the actor who played Foggy is.
Eldon Henson.
A lot of the comedy I find there that really worked to it, and from my opinion, and you'll remember I made comments about this when we watched it. I thought like the comedy around him being blind was actually nice.
Oh yeah. There are a lot of jokes made at Matt's expense when it comes to him being blind.
Like, and you know, like it could have very easily turned mean, and as someone who kind of gets those jokks, like have seen some of them personally. I'm not totally blind, thankfully for myself. But like, you know, I watch it, like there's jokes like in the first episode where the retail lady goes to shake Matt's hand and she goes, "Oh, right."
Yeah, it's just those little moments where like you wouldn't typically think about it, you know, and like you see just, you know, non-disabled people interacting with Matt, and you see them just not. It's not even like they're not shocked or anything. It's just a quick moment that like there's a bit of humor in there. You see that moment of clarity, and it's very quick. It's very subtle, and I like the way it's played.
it's also not punching down, which is where a lot.
No, that's what I was especially happy to see.
Yeah, because that's where a lot of bigoted humor comes from. That like it's mean spirited and it punches down. Like none of the jokes here are mean spirited. The jokes are generally person does not know how to interact with disabled person.
Yeah.
Despite Matt being the focus of the joke, he's not the butt of the joke.
Yeah, definitely.
Which also I think makes it hit all the harder later in the season when we get to the episodes around Nelson v. Murdoch. Because that's when Foggy finds out Matt's
not the man entirely blind.
No,
that he does still have a way of seeing, which is great because that's not something that's like perfectly elaborated on. I mean, we get a bit of it in some of the conversations with Claire early on, but when you really get down to it, that's really explored when Foggy starts answering questions, starts asking questions, and he's like, "How much can you see? Have you been able to see me the whole time? What am I doing right now?" And he gets really pissed at him, and typically in the comics that would be waved away by Stan Lee writing like, "Oh yeah, well he lost his sight, but all of his other senses were heightened, so he can still technically see." And it's like, okay, sure, thanks. Sure. But I like the way it's explored here, and I think it's a really tactful way of doing it.
Yeah, it's also just again it brings back to the emotions. I also think it's very interesting because we're not ashamed to be in the realm of superheroes. Like, yes, we're still small scale. Like, Matt Murdock is not immortal, but he does have superpowers. Like, because I mean, I joke, but like, I don't have super heightened senses because I'm visually impaired.
Yeah, I'm sure you've come to like, much like my brother, of course. I'm sure you've come to rely on a bunch of those other senses more than you would now that you, like, since you are disabled in that way. But it's
not.
But obviously it's not to a superhero degree, you know.
No,
right. Like I could rely slightly more on my hearing than say you, but it's not. I'm not like supersonic hearing, obviously.
Yes. I can't magically figure out, oh, I hear a pin drop. I know exactly in the room where it is, which is very much Daredevil's powers. But again, it's not making a butt of the joke. Like, it's not making a joke out of the powers. It's interesting, and the reactions to anyone who finds out, especially when Foggy finds out later in the season, one, it provides a great source of conflict, and two, it makes the character feel real.
But since we have sort of dipped our toe in Daredevil comics, talking about Daredevil comics here, I'd like to bring up our next Twitter question. We have a comment and a question. First off, Jamie at Jamie_season7 says, my one complaint about it is it didn't have the yellow suit. I don't miss it. I don't like the yellow suit personally. I like how it looks in She-Hulk, but I don't know. I don't think it would have matched the tone of this series personally.
Yeah, this is way too. I don't want to say it's too gritty, because I think you might be able to make it work.
But when the show has chosen its entire aesthetic as just this red in everything that it does, I think having yellow there would be a bit odd.
I mean, plus I think the red more helps more literally, like, deliver the idea of the devil of Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah, because that's an idea that's brought up in the show a lot, is they call him the devil of Hell's Kitchen before he has
because when you hear devil, you don't think yellow.
Yeah. But on to Jamie's actual question here, says, did watching it make Jacob want to read Daredevil comics? So whoever would like to answer that first, I'm definitely directing this towards both of you.
So, you Jacob, you can go first.
So yes, but also, I know the big everyone should read this Daredevil comic is Frank Miller. And I know it's probably brilliant.
Frank Miller Daredevil is the best Frank Miller I've ever read. So, if that helps.
That helps a little, but it's still, I have to mentally prepare for reading a Frank Miller comic.
And hey, the only Frank Miller you've read so far, Jacob, is his good Batman stuff.
This is true.
Yeah.
This is true.
You're also very aware of another Frank Miller comic we'll be doing in the relatively near future.
And oh, dear listener.
I'm excited. I'm very excited. But yeah, so on comics, like, did this make you interested in reading Daredevil comics?
So wait, I guess, yeah.
Either one doesn't matter. Whoever wants to talk.
Well, I'll answer. Well, I'm slowly picking up more comics. I realized, like, to read. As you know, I picked them up off you, the trades.
You borrow them from me.
Personally, it's not like something top of my list. Just more out of convenience. That like I just keep kind of reading the set like in a row. You know what I mean? Like because the listeners aren't in our personal lives. I've been collecting his new. I'll run out of stuff to read, and I go, hey, what's the next New 52 trade I need to read?
Yeah, because you've been doing the Scott Snyder Batman stuff, and so that's what you're sort of doing right now, unless you have like a specific story you want to read. So I mean, but like if I someday was like, hey, here's a Daredevil comic, would you want to read that, or are you content with the show for now?
From me, I'm cool with the show just right now, but I imagine I'll read it one day.
Okay. Cool.
I'd say if I was just watching this show for the first time, I would have seen a Daredevil comic out in the wild, especially if they Marvel actually did promotion. I'd probably pick it up and read it.
Yeah, definitely.
Not necessarily I must read Daredevil stuff now, but that's mainly because, again, issues with Marvel not having always the best way to get into their stuff. Just because.
Yeah. I mean, I know when I was getting like the Frank Miller Daredevil stuff, like it's a pain in the ass just to get like the 4 trades of his main Daredevil stuff.
Yeah.
It's
like I would probably read more Marvel stuff. If it was just easier to pick up.
Yeah. You have to be on the lookout for those things,
Yeah.
Whether it be like an older version that may like drop in price, or a reprint that they make of a classic that'll be out for like a month or two and then go out of print. It's just it happens all the time, and I think they're really bad with that, and it's a practice that I think really needs to change in Marvel Comics. But yeah. I think the MCU is too big for them to even consider that at the moment, which is such a shame. But since we're talking broader MCU, since I just brought it up, let's go to our last set of Twitter questions from our good friend Mason at the GD256. His first question reads: do you think the show works as a pseudo MCU connected show, or should the show have been less or more connected to the MCU as a whole? Personally, I don't care. For me, it's just more like it's better if it's part of the MCU, and it certainly leaves more like a broader range of MCU content that I enjoy. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. If they're going to acknowledge these shows, that'd be awesome. At the same time, I still have them if they're not connected.
I'd also argue that they don't need to add like more connections to the MCU. I think it works the perfect level, especially for what it's doing. Especially if you go back into the mindset when this was released in 2015, when the MCU was still very big, but it wasn't nearly as big as it is now.
Yeah.
And you have just the very the very like the connections are there, but you don't necessarily need them to enjoy the story. And I think that's honestly something the MCU could take a page from. But it's part of the MCU.
It's gotta be. I mean,
it's not a question in my mind anyway.
Yeah,
they've brought back both Cox and D'Onofrio.
And there are definitely more on the way. I mean, every Disney Plus show big rumor so far has been true. Apparently, they are going to start teasing Jessica Jones coming back soon when Echo comes about. So we'll see. But on to Mason's second question. He goes, and I really like this question. I'm excited for this one. Says, if you could plan a Daredevil season to happen during the blip, which characters would you have disappear? So on this, I'd like to point out first off that we may be getting answers to this soon in She-Hulk, and we may already have those answers by the time this episode comes out. But for now, as pure speculation, as Charlie Cox hasn't reappeared in She-Hulk at the time of recording, what would we play around with? What would we have here?
I would actually have Foggy disappear.
That'd be interesting, and play around with maybe the relationship between Matt and Karen.
Matt and Karen, and then Matt, Karen, and Foggy as a trio. Because the way the show sets them up, they are a trio. They are a team, and they are meant to be kind of an inseparable team, which I really enjoy. But also he's kind of Foggy as a character is kind of the core heart. Like he provides the jokes. He's the one who, I don't want to say, he's the one who kind of gives Matt his humanity back by the end of the season.
Yeah.
You get rid of him, you lose a lot of who Matt Murdock is.
Where does Matt go? Yeah.
I was thinking as a pure active speculation. With the core cast, I would get rid of Karen, because then that's easier to drive what is already set up as a pretty big wedge between Foggy and Matt. I
think one of the most interesting things to do with the blip and the core cast of Daredevil is to make it so that neither Matt nor Fisk have allies to directly turn to, and it's almost just a one-on-one between the two of them, and they're left in this desolate world that affiliates with neither of them.
That could be interesting.
I would love to see that. I think
because I think. In my speculative thought, you achieve that by just getting rid of Karen because, well, just by the end of season 1, Foggy and Matt, with just enough push, are not going to be friends.
I mean, I suppose. I think there's a bit more to it than you're giving it credit for, and also having the foresight of the second season and only the second season may be hindering your opinion a little bit.
Because I've only seen season 1, and this is very much.
And also for me, I mean, like I know personally that the bond between Matt and Foggy is a little bit stronger than that. But it is interesting, and I think you could play around with a lot of things there. I think there are a lot of characters that you could have come in and out, and
I will say it's a shame the MCU hasn't done more with the blip, as far as I can see, because.
Yeah,
there's a lot of storytelling potential you could do there, MCU.
Yeah, didn't some MCU creative recently say that like, you know, they've done everything they can with the blip, and it's like, no, you fucking haven't. You've barely done anything with it.
You know, it's almost like they're like, oh, we have this really interesting idea. We'll do like 5 throwaway sentences that imply we actually cared about it beyond its initial reaction, and call it a day.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah. Let's move back into casting now that we're through our Twitter questions. We mentioned a few times in this last question. Deborah Ann Wall is Karen. Now I'm curious. This is a character that could be taken a couple of different ways if you don't know who she is from the comics ahead of time, and neither of you have read Daredevil comics. Did you know who Karen was ahead of time? Did you know that she would be as big a part of the story as she was? I'm curious what your thoughts on her were, specifically early on in the show when her future with Matt and Foggy was a little unclear.
I was initially skeptical, and I think I had these thoughts when I first watched it, way back. That's nearly 7 years ago now. That they might just make her be a one-off, which again would be a waste. Like,
because Deborah Ann Wall is brilliant. Like,
Deborah Ann Wall is brilliant. And she's essentially the inciting incident for the show. She's the first breadcrumb that leads to Wilson Fisk just being a thing and having this whole criminal and capitalistic network. And I would be afraid of perhaps her becoming too much of a damsel. Which I'm very glad they never really do. Like, the first episode, she's in trouble. She's framed for a murder. And we get, some of the best
in some very graphic detail, I would like to say.
Oh yes, This is a show that is not for children.
Like we've mentioned the comedy a few times, but like no, it's very much like one of the first pieces of MCU media that separated itself from what the MCU was doing and said, like, this is Netflix. Like, I keep in mind, also at the time, 2015, Netflix originals were on fire, and they were this prestigious company that made like only the highest quality shows at the time. This was Orange is the New Black at its absolute height. So like Daredevil being a Netflix original was a big deal. And so they really went at that, and they made this a very very hard hitting drama.
I'd also
rather than
say
just
it's
your regular
important to
superhero
note
show.
that this isn't also that high budget of a show either. Like,
oh yeah, I mean, hell, like the best. I mean, I was just about to bring up the fight scenes actually. Let's talk about the fight scenes because they're shot so creatively on such a low budget. I mean, obviously the most famous of which is the famous hallway fight scene at the end of episode 2. It's all one shot. He goes up and down this hall, saves a kid, takes out these guys. Fucking brilliant. It's all one shot. Clearly made on a budget, but it's so good.
I'd argue even the budget doesn't show. You can't.
No, God no.
I was gonna say, I was actually gonna ask. The show had a small budget.
Yeah,
it doesn't show. But you can tell the budget wasn't bloated, which is
When I guess I should specify when I say like clearly made on a small budget, I mean more like you can tell that like like they didn't have much to work with and they made the most of what it was there. And it works perfectly, honestly, I think.
They got a bunch of. They also just got a bunch of really good directors in. From basically all around the television industry of the time, and they have a very good group of writers, and it's each episode does a really good job also of just being, I don't want to say being standalone, but also having a beginning, middle, and end.
The episodes don't like bleed into each other. They don't become like all one thing. Each episode does definitely stand on its own.
Except maybe like the last two, but that's the last two of the season.
Those are for very specific reasons, though. I think that brings us perfectly into the next casting I wanted to talk about. I was going to bring up the main villain next, but I would love to talk about Von D. Curtis Hall as Ben Urich, who is just like the best, not the best thing, but like just one of the things that makes specifically season 1 so special.
The most human part of the show.
Yeah. And like,
a lot of this is structured like a crime drama.
Mm-hmm.
And you never quite know who you can trust. And Ben Urich as a character, you know who he is from his introductory scene.
Yeah.
You get his deal, and he's dealing with some tough topics, and his final scene is one of the most tense scenes of the show.
Oh yeah, because like right from the second, this is a spoiler podcast, we could talk about it. The scene is his death scene, and Kingpin is sitting in his house directly across from him. The moment he's in that scene, you know how it's going to end. What can we do in this space of time? And the writing is fucking brilliant, and they make the most of it. It's just it's so good. It's also, so good.
Because that was in episode 12, right?
Yeah, very very.
That was in episode 12. That was directed by one Euros Lynn.
Oh my God, was it? I didn't even realize. That's fucking wild. Okay. Jacob 1, sorry. Big RTD era Doctor Who director.
Thank you.
Yeah. The man knows how to do character shots. And also, what's so fascinating is Urich as a character every character is kind of at least a little bit tragic in some way. And Urich, obviously, his wife is sick and he is just trying to provide for her. And he's trying to break a story that basically he can't break. And what makes Hello Motorcycle.
It really sucks because me and Jacob 1 are in the same house. So
Yeah. Oh, motorcycle.
Like if I thought ahead, I would have like shut the windows in my room.
I don't know why you didn't.
I still can.
You're good. Go ahead, Jacob 2.
But what's amazing about just his entire arc is it's learning. A lot of it's about learning to really go after the story again. Using the knowledge, and his death is eventually the inspiration that actually takes down Wilson Fisk, the kingpin of crime. And it all builds. And it's really effective that it starts just as this disparate thread, and eventually Yurik and Karen have a plot together, basically their side of the story. Matt kind of bounces around the character plots, but even then, they aren't as in depth. Because part of the whole point of him being the devil of Hell's Kitchen is that he really doesn't have a direction. He doesn't entirely know what he's doing, not from inexperience, but just from the fact that he's a vigilante trying to take down a conspiracy.
He mostly just knows why he's doing it, not how he's doing it and how it affects him in his personal life.
Yes,
and that's very clear through the course of the show.
Another great supporting role I'd like to call out here is Peter McRobbie as Father Lantom, who appears a couple times throughout this season and has a lot of the best scenes throughout this whole season.
Which is, I'd argue, it's also very important to acknowledge that Matt Murdock is a Catholic.
It's a big part of his character, and I know you're not going to like to hear this, Jacob, too, but it is a big thing that Frank Miller played on a lot, and pretty much made one of the defining aspects of Matt Murdock as a character.
Yeah, but I like the way here is, despite being Catholic and drawing on a lot of Catholic themes, the writing never gets too preachy.
Oh no,
it never
no,
becomes
definitely not.
It never becomes pro-Catholic propaganda, which is a thing that can happen in superhero media, especially in the 21st century, in a lot of weird ways.
Yeah, but no, I just love so many of his scenes here. I think also one of the best things about his character is that he is one of the few people in the show that knows that Matt is Daredevil, and he figures it out, like, pretty much all by himself. He has this guy coming to him regularly asking for forgiveness for what he's about to do, and there's also this guy who shows up at the exact same time fighting off criminals and doing these awful things to them, and he just puts it together.
I mean, it's also because Matt Murdock, he doesn't have a great secret identity. Like,
no, and actually that's what a lot of the season's about, is developing that identity. Both figuratively in the writing and literally in his physical prowess and how he looks too, because he gets the suit by the end and everything. And
also just the sheer amount of times he fucks up. He's responsible for people's deaths. He's a superhero who does kill, because I don't want to say it's a gray morality. I'm more fond of Terry Pratchett's it's white morality that's got grubby. Because that's very much what it is, because he is a good person. And having a priest as a moral compass puts a lot of the themes together. It especially helps tie in, one, with the fact that he was raised essentially in an orphanage after... in a Catholic orphanage after his dad died. And his dad's death was here is that formative moral event of, doing what's right, even if it will get you hurt. It's just a thing that Matt constantly does. And constantly is, brought to the forefront. It's why he needs forgiveness. It's why he needs advice. It's why he needs to learn how to open himself up and trust his friends.
I wanted to bring one last supporting role before we move into the villains. That is a character that shows up not just in Daredevil, but most of the Marvel Netflix shows. Claire Temple, as played by Rosario Dawson. I'm curious, what do you make of her role specifically in this show? Because she was a character that was clearly made to cross over with all the other shows as well. But specifically here, what do we think of her role in the show?
I'd argue one point where I don't want to say the show falls flat, but I think it doesn't explore it as well as it could. Because she gets her episode in episode 2, and she gets some things to do later on. But she's very much in the background, and I don't know if they necessarily knew what they were going to entirely do with the character.
I understand that. I think it could have been. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that just in the context of Daredevil season 1, she's a good character. I could see, like, when I think back on season 1, I think, okay, I could see the kind of direction they were thinking this will go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the ideas behind it.
Yeah.
But I will say a lot, not a lot, no, I shouldn't say that, but, like, a chunk of her plot is taken up with just getting Matt to trust her and then getting, if I'm remembering correctly, which I should be, is getting past the obvious romantic plot that you have to get past. Just that, like, that would just someone would naturally bring up.
Yeah. It does feel somewhat like obligatory, like it has to be there. Like I get what you're saying, but I don't hate it. I don't hate the way it's handled.
No, it doesn't bother me. I just think like the show has to clearly address the point that someone would bring up if the show didn't on its own.
Yeah, I gotcha. Makes sense. Shall we move on to villains?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I have so many thoughts.
Let's work our way up, actually.
Okay.
We'll lead up to the big guy. First, I want to talk about Wai Ching Ho as Madame Gao, another character that crosses over between a couple of the shows. But she's very prominent here. And I think, Jacob, too, I really want to hear your thoughts on her character.
Okay. So, I'm very glad for all the villains who are, not white. They're allowed to speak in their native languages.
Yeah. Oh my god, there's a whole sequence in one of the last couple episodes between Fisk and Gao where it's just subtitles between the two of them.
It's just in Mandarin.
Which was awful for me.
I think that is one it's a very important thing. One, it connects just to New York as a place. It helps make New York feel alive. She's also a monstrous villain, and you don't really see how much of a monster she is until like episode 12.
And she's one of those characters that like doesn't do much herself. Like she has other people do things for her. But just those commands that she makes and what she makes people do are just fucking awful.
Yeah. She's just she's a terrifying character. And again, I think part of one going into these villains, we do need to talk that the fact that the downfall of Wilson Fisk is not really Matt like Team Daredevil doing anything.
Oh yeah,
it's his own downfall that they're just taking advantage of.
Yeah, because it's mostly people leaving him.
Yeah,
you know? It's isolating Fisk because he loses more and more of his allies.
Yeah. And Gao is basically the last ally to really leave him. Basically, technically, like you have Owlsley being killed near the end, but it's Gao fleeing back to Hong Kong after her heroin operation goes up in flames, literally.
Ha, Hong Kong. Ha.
I was just gonna make a similar joke.
I don't get the joke.
You'll find out more later.
Okay.
As we continue to go through the shows, but she does.
As you get older, you'll understand.
Yeah. As I guess I could call it the one line that she has. She says it is considerably further than that. And I think that's interesting. But yeah, our next villain I want to talk about, you mentioned him briefly here, is Bob Gunton as Leland Owlsley, or as he's known in the comics, but thankfully they never refer to him here as the Owl.
That would have been the worst.
That would have been so dumb.
He's I think he was first introduced in like one of the first couple issues of Daredevil, and he's very much one of those 60s Stan Lee creations that just does not work as well
that,
today.
That tracks.
Yeah.
So that definitely tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as a character, he again also really interesting. He's basically the comic relief villain.
But also like he's good at what he does. I mean, I kept imagining him because I know the actor. I'm assuming except for I think you've never seen it, Jacob one. Shawshank Redemption. He's the warden in that.
Yes.
And he's great. Like he's a great, like, he's a threat, but it's there's something kind of fun about him, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's because he's very wry. And like very good at performing. Like the whole twist where it's like, surprise, he's the one who's behind trying to poison Vanessa.
Yeah.
But like when that gala happens, all he's doing is like, don't I need to be checked out? You know, I held a glass of the champagne.
Yeah. He's very charismatic for just that absolute.
I liked him because I felt like in another show he could be not maybe the top, but like he could take out the top.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, he gets pretty close.
Yeah. He's also the one who basically is cleaning up all of Fisk's messes. And it just gets so tired of it at the end. Also, okay. I think we do need to acknowledge how much of this show is pretty explicitly anti-capitalist.
Oh yeah,
I mean that's a commentary.
I mean that's a lot of Daredevil as it is. I'm reading the current Chip Zdarsky run on Daredevil, and same thing. Like it's drilled in with that anti-capitalist messaging. And,
well, because all of this is about money. Money is power. Money is a status. Money is the accidental giving of the poor's money is what brings the kingpin down, because the poor's in this situation are Nelson and Murdoch, who, you know, have a shitty office in episode 1 that they just get, and then the Kingpin walks into their life, basically makes them take the case with Karen, and that starts the entire ball rolling.
And Kingpin inadvertently creates what will become his downfall in the end. And it's great. I love that. But working alongside Kingpin, and actually the person that gives them the money in the end, I want to talk about Toby Leonard Moore as James Wesley. He's like, there's something so enjoyable about this character. Just the way that Moore plays him. I love it.
Such a scumbag.
He is.
Such a scumbag.
Yeah.
And his death.
Like, that's one of the most tense scenes in the whole show. Like,
I 100% agree.
With a gun on the table and like, oh my god, it's so good. Just such a great character, and he's like, he carries a certain confidence with him. I think that's most of the charm of his character. You know, just these little things where like he knows how trusted he is by Fisk. Little moments like, you know, bringing these people directly to Fisk at the end of episode 4, in the car door scene when he slams the guy's head in. And he just sort of like moves over. He's like, okay, man, that's some blood on me, whatever. You know, it's very casual. It's very confident. I like it.
He's Fisk's only real friend. Like, you get the sense that he does genuinely care about Wilson Fisk as a person.
Oh yeah, and like when Wesley dies, like that really hits Fisk hard.
Like he kind of walked around and like had the confidence that like Wesley is like, I am the only person that Fisk wouldn't even think about killing.
Yeah, and like even to the point where people start bringing up the possibility before we find out that Leland is the one that poisoned Vanessa. Like there's that idea where the show even plays around with like, what if it's Wesley? But no, Wesley is just that loyal to Fisk
because they're friends. There's also just the brilliant fact that he works as the primary villain for the first third of the show.
As we slowly build up Fisk, and before Fisk is even a public figure, Wesley is the guy going around being the man just directly below the Kingpin.
This man in a suit, and he's so scummy. I forgot that he died. Honestly.
Oh really?
Yeah. Again, very beginning and the very end, but his first scene. It's just this perfect character introduction. Like, a lot of episode 1 is, you could use episode 1 of Daredevil as a case study of, here is how you introduce a lot of these, here's how you introduce characters. And we can play around with, here's how people go off one another, all in one 15-minute episode.
I guess before we talk about the man himself, I want to bring up one last sort of character on the villain side of things. I'm gonna totally butcher the actress's name. Ayelet Zura. Zura. I'm not. I have no clue how to say it. The actress that plays Vanessa. I mean, I think she's such an interesting part of Fisk's character. You know, there's a certain humanity to Fisk, and I guess we'll slowly work our way into Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin as we talk about this. But Fisk, I think, can be a likable person, and we see a lot of that through Vanessa.
Yes. Also, I think it's important to note Vanessa's position as someone of status. She works in an art gallery, and the gallery very much is we sell art to the brightest and best. And there are the two art gallery scenes in particular, the one near the beginning of the show, and then the one with the one where Murdoch, Vanessa, and Fisk,
when Matt and Fisk meet for the first time.
For the first real time, as Matt Murdock, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of subtext. We introduce very much the theme of that one painting.
Yeah, Rabbit in a Snowstorm, which I love that idea. That consistently comes up throughout the show, not just in season 1, but especially in season 3. Like, we bring that idea back, and we really play around with
visuals. A lot of the visuals in the paintings in that art gallery guide the season itself. It's very good, subtle visual storytelling. Zura as Vanessa also very much holds her own and very much sees the humanity in Fisk.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, like, you really can see that under different circumstances, I think Fisk can be a good person. Yes. and can be and in some ways is a relatable character.
In a lot of ways. And that she also isn't fazed by her lover doing horrible things at all.
Mm-hmm.
And is like right by him. Okay, we'll murder people, because your intentions are still pure.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like what he's doing isn't like the reason behind it isn't unjustifiable.
Yeah.
It's essentially the same reason Matt is doing what he's doing.
Yeah, you draw these parallels between the two characters, and I think it's in episode 8, the flashback sequences, where we get Fisk's backstory, where he kills his dad and everything. Like, I've watched this season 3 times now. I've seen this show 3 times, this first season at least 3 times, and every single time that the moment where he kills his father is just absolutely gut-wrenching. And
it's a brutal episode to watch in general. It's just and it gets difficult to watch.
Yeah. It just it's uncomfortable to watch, but I really love what it does.
Obviously intentionally uncomfortable.
Oh yeah. It just doesn't pull its punches, and you see this building of a man who will become the Kingpin and will come to do horrible things.
Yes.
But you paint it in a light where you see, like, okay, well, he's in a bad situation. How does he get out of this? Okay, that's a little far, but it works. It really does.
But also, his dad's an abusive asshole who really deserves to be.
You know,
who kind of deserves it.
It's in this weird moral area where we would probably go, yeah, this is fine in most situations.
We see it in his backstory, but also it's a larger theme in the show. This continuous cycle of violence, evil breeding evil, and bringing out the worst in people. You know, and no one here really does become the better man, because when we get to the final fight between Matt and Fisk in the end, it's still just this awful beatdown. And Daredevil doesn't really show himself as a hero in the end. He shows himself as a protector, and I think that there's a very clear distinction to make there.
Yes. So we may as well. Shall we move into just talking about D'Onofrio as a performer?
I think we already have.
Yeah. I think we've moved into that conversation.
And how, let's be clear, he's, if not the best MCU villain ever, in my opinion, he's the second best MCU villain ever, only topped by another character in the Marvel Netflix stuff. So yeah. But just
I also have some interesting notes on how they frame Fisk, because he's written and played to be autistic.
Yeah, definitely.
That is That isn't subtext, that's text. But very interestingly, and there's a great video I watched basically about autistic coding and superhero media, where I'm kind of pulling this from. They don't frame the autism as a scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
They frame his power and his money and his willingness to kill people as the scary thing.
In fact, his autism coding is what makes him a sympathetic character, like we were talking about. You know, it's used to make this horrible person actually seem like a pretty nice guy, and you understand what he's going through.
That first date scene is just so relatable, because it's like
how uncomfortable he gets when his business gets involved with his date, and how that causes him to act out. I think that's brilliant.
And D'Onofrio as an actor, that cadence.
Mm-hmm.
That
oh my god, yeah, like
cadence.
Like I Jacob one knows I meme on it a lot, but like I just love the way D'Onofrio delivers fucking everything.
Oh yeah, like we joke about it personally. But it's actually like really brilliant.
Yeah,
it is. It's great.
And that final shot of Fisk in his jail cell. Looking at the wall.
In the snowstorm is there. Like it's it's so good. That evil hidden in plain sight, but is still lost in the storm. I love that.
And just watching the man unravel himself.
Mm-hmm. And he does do it to himself.
Yes.
You know, like Karen kills Wesley, but why is Wesley even in that position? It's because of Fisk, because Fisk acted out. And Leland dies because Fisk kills him. Gal goes away because Fisk screwed up. Fisk, he is the reason that he fails.
Fisk manipulates Matt into killing Nobu, his Japanese contacts. Like, it's this utter frustration, and it's all because it's all because he made one slight mistake in hiring the two only good lawyers in New York, or at least in Hell's Kitchen.
Not, I shouldn't say good. More like not crooked lawyers. I guess.
Crooked.
Yeah, just to say good. Like there are other people good at their jobs.
They are good at their jobs, but they are also good people.
Yeah.
Yes, that's very clear. Very, very big difference from just being good.
When all Fisk saw was a small law firm that has absolutely no business, and they will take any money, let alone a big check like that. And Fisk just didn't know what he was getting himself into. And again, like we mentioned a couple times, like he is his own undoing. It's great. It's a fascinating character. And I mean, obviously, Jacob 2 and Jacob 1 already knows. Like Fisk remains a pretty big part of the show throughout seasons 2 and 3.
Yes.
And like just it only gets better from here. Like his character is set up brilliantly here, but it really does just get better and better as it goes on.
Yes. I also think it's really, really interesting just how they show how far the corruption has gone. Like it's 2015 and they're already basically saying all cops are bastards. Also fuck the feds, because there's a lot of corruption there, and that's important. Important to portray in show.
In fact, there's this whole bit where they make you think that there's a character like sort of like on the inside going against Ben Urich working for Fisk, and they make you think that it's Ellison, who's head of the newspaper there, and it's not
I'm gonna be honest, I totally fell for that.
I think most people did. I don't know if Jacob 2 did.
Oh, I did, because the guy playing Ellison is really good at playing a scummy bastard.
Yeah, and also another character that like you'll see more of in seasons 2 and 3. Like he's a really great character.
But it's not him. Also, the downfall, the way the music choice in episode 13.
Yeah.
And just the way that it's shot.
Also, you brought up that montage. I want to mention a character that we haven't talked about at all, but it is the only character in the entire Marvel Netflix universe to show up in every single show, Turk Barrett. I don't know if that character stood out to you at all, Jacob 2. I just got to know if you had any thoughts.
He didn't? Who was he?
Turk Barrett is the guy at the beginning of episode 3 who gives the guy the gun that he says like, oh, it won't jam. You know, he's like, it won't jam, or my name ain't Turk Barrett. And then the gun jams. He's that guy.
He shows up in every
single one.
Like every show I've seen. My favorite is you know what my favorite is, right, Joey?
The Luke Cage appearance?
Yeah, that is easily my favorite.
That's the best one. But yeah, he's there for every single show at some point. So he's part of that montage. He gets caught in the end. And yeah, he's just a really funny character. I love him. He's so good. Yeah. me and Jacob one joke about him all the time. Because at this time you're going on Defenders soon, Jacob one.
Yes.
So yes, you've seen him in most of the rest of the shows already. But yeah, it's great.
I also think it's just, again, Fisk. Just Fisk's build up. You don't see him till episode 4.
End of episode 3.
And episode 3.
Yeah. But then he actually has his time to shine in episode 4.
Yeah.
But even then, he doesn't become a big part of the show until he publicly outs himself. And I love how great is that moment when they're ready to publish that story talking about Wilson Fisk openly and ready to call him out, and he gets ahead of them and calls himself out publicly ahead of time. Like, it's just it's so good.
He's very good at that through the whole season, though.
Always just being that one step ahead of them and continuously acting like he's in control as he slowly loses control.
And just being one step ahead, like, one, you already get a lot of really good side characters, like Mrs. Cardenas.
Yes, Mrs. Cardenas.
Mrs. Cardenas.
I love her.
Who is her fate? She is just. It's like that. A lot of the deaths in the show just have weight because they've built up all these really good characters.
Yeah, all lovable in some small way. You know. Cardenas, I think, is the perfect example of that because she's barely there, and you just love her by the time she dies. You know, it's great. I love her.
But also, you know, she commands her scenes, playing basically matchmaker between Foggy and Karen. Also Josie. Also, what is that noise?
Jacob, one, you need to stop.
I'm glad it's not me this time.
No, it's not you.
What I do find kind of interesting is that the fact that this all dropped at once, like on Netflix.
Yeah, well, they did that with all the shows. I mean, Netflix is still doing that to this day. They only just started changing it recently with Stranger Things.
Yeah, which, like, I get it, but it almost feels like it was written to be week by week. Like,
yeah, I could see that, but that was also just the standard for streaming shows at the time.
Yeah,
like let's be real. The weekly streaming episode drop is only a fairly recent advent with Disney Plus's existence. So
I'd say Disney Plus is really where I would say is where most people have I have to wait a week.
Yeah, I hadn't seen any streaming service do that before Disney Plus did.
I think Amazon did it occasionally, but
oh really?
Yeah. I think it's also just a smart way to present a longer story like this. Like,
yeah, I get that.
Like, but I'm also someone who doesn't like to binge.
See, I like binging. I like, yeah. I mean, ask Jacob one. I'm a horrible binger. Like when I get on a show, like I fucking fly through it.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't, which is why this episode is coming out in September.
And it came to Disney Plus mid-March.
Yeah. In my defense, we were doing Batman the animated series and Superman the animated series.
We had S-TAS. You know, there were other things to do in between. So, and realistically, this was going to be bonus episode 4, but the Sandman came out before then. So
yes, so it's
bonus episode 5 now. So
yes.
Does that mostly wrap up our Daredevil conversation then?
I'm just trying to think of a couple of other things that I might want to mention, just that stand out. We haven't talked about Stick at all.
Stick!
No,
yes,
we haven't.
Stick.
That's a good point.
Yes, I totally forgot to mention Stick. I apologize.
Is Stick a Frank Miller creation or is this a Stan Lee creation?
I believe Frank Miller, if I'm not.
I was gonna say, because
it does feel very Frank, doesn't it?
Despite this having its own identity, I can see Frank Miller's fingerprints all over this show.
Oh yeah, I just looked it up. Yeah, it's a Frank Miller creation.
I want to say I don't think it's his first scene, but Joey, I mention this all the time. If I'm gonna say, oh, Stick here, like I'm gonna go. What is he gonna complain that they have furniture too?
Oh, when he first walks in the apartment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just love Stick. He's a great character. Can't think of the actor he's played by now. Shit, who is he? Because he's from oh god, what's he from? Why can't I think? Scott Glenn. There we go. Yeah. That's right, Scott Glenn, who I adore. He was in fuck. Why am I completely blanking on everything right now? Is he in Silence of the Lambs? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Silence of the Lambs. That's right. Yep. Love Scott Glenn, and he's a great choice for the role. Like I love the way he plays it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just a great character.
Again, also a total bastard.
Yeah, but I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. Stick will become a bit more important in season 2.
I imagine.
Yeah, he's only here for the one episode for now, but in the comics, he's mostly involved in the whole Elektra storyline, and they do Elektra in season 2, so there's that.
Correct.
But yeah, so that is that. All right. Anything else to bring up before we start to wrap up?
I just say that you should definitely watch it, especially if you have Marvel fatigue in general.
Yeah. Like if you're looking for just some truly great MCU or just Marvel live action content that you haven't seen before, and you want to, cleanse your taste buds, cleanse your palate. That's what I was fucking looking for.
And you're not a child, and because if you're a child.
I mean, for the most part, with Daredevil, luckily it's just the violence. Like
it's just the violence, but it's still very intense.
Yeah, I'd say it could be a little much. Like if you're like an older kid, I don't think there's really much of an issue with this season necessarily.
I mean, I know I watched this when it first came out, and I was 15 at the time, so I was fine.
But if you're like a young kid who likes the movies, and you're
maybe not the best for you, and also if you're a young kid who likes the movies, most of the other shows are actually a bit more risque than Daredevil, I would say. Specifically, Jessica Jones, some bits of Luke Cage.
As someone who's seen some more of the Netflix / Disney Plus shows than Jacob too, yeah,
definitely. But not to say that those shows aren't as good. I mean, Daredevil's probably the best of the 6 shows, but I mean, they're all great. They really are. And for those who are curious, yes, me and Jacob 2, definitely do plan to continue covering each season of the Marvel Netflix shows. I'm not sure at what pace, because we are still doing the DC Animated Universe stuff.
Yes.
And we may or may not have a video game thing coming up soon.
Yes, so. We also may or may not have a different DC bonus episode for a live action thing. It's all going to turn into what the fuck can Jacob finish first?
Yeah, it really is. So whichever you want to do, we have options. We have the next Marvel Netflix one. We have the next DCAU show. We have that other DC live action thing and the video game. Yeah. So one of those.
Though probably not a DC film for a while.
Well, I mean, do we want to do Black Adam? Because that comes out next month.
Is that actually coming out?
It is, yes. Next month is
We'll
Black
talk
Adam.
about that. We'll talk about that.
So there may be a Black Adam bonus episode. Who knows? We don't know what's coming next. We're fucking sick of bonus episodes at this point. We've been recording way too much lately. All right, let's start to close out. Of course, as always, thank you all so much for listening. It really does mean a lot. We've seen some great growth on the podcast lately, and it means the world to us. In the meantime, you can follow us all on Twitter. I am at Jomo with 3 underscores. Jacob is at Newt5. Jacob 2 is at Newt5996. Jacob 1 is now on Twitter. He wasn't actively on Twitter last time he was on the podcast, but now he is. He is at Hezorizid, HEZORISZID. He is actually, I don't know if you want to promote it or not.
Yeah, I won't go into a huge long thing. I'm currently writing short stories. I'm posting them on a blog, the Google blog service. It's under the name the Adventures of the Mirage. Awesome. It's easiest to find through my Twitter.
Cool. Yeah. So I will leave that all linked down in the description. You can go to his Twitter, follow him, read the Adventures of the Mirage. How many stories do you have out at the time of recording?
At the time of recording, I have 3 out. I'm posting one story a month, one piece of art that relates kind of like, it's either like a character piece or a piece of art about the story a month. So it's at least 2 posts a month.
Cool, very cool. And I'm assuming, I think by the time this bonus episode comes out, the fourth short story should be out soon. So yeah, yeah, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, the reading is there. So but yeah, also yeah, so follow all three of us. All of our links will be down in the description below. You can go check us out and watch Daredevil. Just fucking do it. It's fucking great. And I guess that about does it. As at the time of this coming out, this should be coming out between our 2 Wonder Woman episodes. So next up, the next regular episode of the show will be Wonder Woman by George Perez Volume 2, and then we'll be entering a block of a new comic that we have not covered before. So very exciting stuff on the way. I guess until next time, this has been Joey Morgan
and Jacob Licklider
and Jacob Morgan.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.